This episode of New Media Lab is brought to you by Tweaked Audio. To get awesome headphones, go to tweakedaudio.com and use the coupon code Southgate to get 30% off, free shipping, and a lifetime warranty. Or you can get there through the link on our website, southgatemediagroup.com. Welcome to the New Media Lab. I am your host, Rob Southgate. Today, I have a very special guest. I have Ricky Diaz. He is a podcaster from our network, and he does the Primatech Files, which is a show all about the show Heroes. It's been really successful for us. He gives us a lot of insights into his social media strategy and kind of how that show organically grew into being such a large force for us. So here he is, Ricky Diaz. Ricky, thank you so much for joining me here in the New Media Lab. This has been a long time coming, man. I was really excited to see that we could line this up. For those of you that don't know Ricky, Ricky is in the UK. I'm in the United States. And we've got some time differences there, and we're both super busy. So getting you on here, this is literally the first time we've spoken to each other.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to say, before we get into this, I just want to say thank you, Rob, for putting up with me and my OCD and how particular I can be. I know it took me a while for Lilith to get used to it, so I'm glad that, it's been clear sailing with you as well. So, yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Your OCD doesn't bother me at all. In fact, I feel so blessed to have you here. Martha and I talk about that all the time. And that's another funny thing. Before you started doing Primatech, Ricky does the Primatech Files for the Southgate Media Group. And before you started doing Primatech Files, which is what we're here to talk about, you were working for TV Binges, Show Ratings TV, which we're partnered with. And it's funny because we were talking online, but you were like the only one from there that I didn't know. And I kept getting these notices from Ricky loves TV and Ricky loves movies and Ricky Diaz. And I'm going, who is this? How is he not hitting my radar on this? And then one day Lilith sent me a note and said, Ricky and I are doing this show. And I was like, how do you know Lilith? And I guess we just hired Ricky. So you know what? It's great. But I think it was a long time coming for this to happen.
Definitely.
So, Ricky, tell us a little about yourself before we get into Primatech Files. What's your background? You're a new media person, that's for sure. Yeah. So let's hear it.
So, basically I work in post-production over here in the UK. I've kind of been doing it for a couple of years now. But most of my stuff comes from, the beginning of the story is basically I went away on cruise ships for a couple of years and I didn't watch TV. And when I got back, I just ended up binge watching a lot of stuff and found the joys of Twitter. From Twitter, I met Kyle and Blair, and then it all kind of started from there. Like I started joining up with them from We Love TV more to Show Ratings to TV Binges. And then, through Kyle is where I met kind of, Lilith. And that's where Primatech Files came from.
Now, Primatech Files, but I don't want to get into that too much yet because I want to talk about what you do a little bit. But Primatech Files is about Heroes. Are you a huge Heroes fan? Is that why that niche attracted you, or did you just see it as an opportunity?
Oh, no. I've always been like a really big Heroes fan. It was one of the TV shows that I used to love as I'd say a teenager. But yeah, it was one of the shows that I first really got into and started like checking back on the mythology because there was so much extra content for Heroes. There wasn't just the TV program. There was like comic books. There was like online games. They had ARGs. And I was checking all of that out. And then when it ended, I was working on RPG boards and like all my knowledge from Heroes came from that RPG board because I was trying to make it as canon as possible while diverging at the same time. And I was on that site for a good couple of years. Then that was it. Here I kind of left there to go traveling. And then when I came back, started working for Kyle and Blair. And then Heroes Reborn came out. And I was like, if there is one show that I want to podcast about, it's going to be Heroes. So reached out to Lilith and the rest is history.
Yeah, the rest is history. Well, the reason that I wanted to have you on is, number one, I wanted to talk to you about your social media strategy. I wanted to talk about, how you've done some of this stuff. For the listener. The reason that I specifically wanted to talk to Ricky is with Primatech Files, which from a standpoint of TV shows is pretty niche.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Heroes Reborn was how many episodes?
13.
Yeah. 13 episode series. That's bringing back a series that's years old that only lasted, 3 or 4 seasons?
Yeah, 4.
And with all that behind it, you have so far put together 164 episodes, or actually, I think we have more in the can here.
Yeah.
And your numbers from a download perspective are like quadruple our highest show.
Well, it's the niche, isn't it?
It is the niche.
Yeah, definitely. Heroes was always kind of like it was one of those shows that came about just round about the sweet spot of TV and the second, I think they called it the second viewing experience. So like Twitter, and I think they had like little things that you could watch in the commercial breaks, all that kind of stuff. And it was one of the first TV programs that I remember. I think Lost was quite big on it as well, but there was the whole mythology behind it that you kind of had to look if you were a really big fan online, and they captured a lot of people that way, and they kind of stayed. And so I think the online Heroes fandom is as much as sometimes it infuriates me, it's one of the most passionate fan bases there is, whether they like it or not. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, to me, it's just fascinating. And you mentioned Lost. Lost is actually, when I've talked to other podcasters that do pop culture stuff, Lost is a touchstone where the two that come up every time, people say the reason I started podcasting was fixation on Lost and a fixation on X-Files. And I really think you've hit on something. I think there's a fixation on Heroes that most people don't put at the top of their mind. But as soon as you said, I want to do Primatech Files, I'm going to be talking Heroes, somebody who hadn't thought about Heroes in a while got really excited and started thinking, oh my gosh, I used to read all this stuff and I know the comics are good. And, I got like right back to it. The ironic thing is I didn't watch a single episode of Heroes Reborn. I just listened to your podcast. So
that's all right then.
Now, that was intended to be a 13-week series, and they stated that from the beginning, but have you heard any rumblings? Are they bringing it back?
No, I don't think at the moment. When it finished its run, it's a very clickbaity thing to say that the show has been cancelled. But they'd always said that it was going to be it just depends on your point of view. Like Tim Kring has always said it was going to be a one and done, but if there was more kind of a need for it, there was a possibility of it coming back, and it didn't do too well in the ratings. So a lot of people had said, oh, well, that's what they would say if it was going to come back, it would have come back. But obviously because it's been cancelled. But
I don't necessarily buy that with this. I think that this series was meant to be a chapter, and this series seems like something that has shall we call it a second life? It can live in other formats, kind of like Buffy has gone on to live in comics, and those comics are popular, I think this is the same type of thing. So I don't know how much I buy that as clickbait, or really that was just kind of where their head was at, and Tim Kring thinks, I have other projects I can do with this.
I think it's just one of those things that like he had the time and he had the story that he wanted to tell, and he wanted to finish the story, and they were given this opportunity. He took it, and now it's just a case of waiting a couple of years, hopefully not 5, for him to think of another story. We talked to quite a few of the writers, and one of the writers is really quite friendly with us, and he's told us that, they do have a plan for a second season of Heroes. They wouldn't call it Reborn because that's a separate chapter. They would call it something else, but they actually have an idea, and it would be something completely different from what we've seen. And that's all I could get out of him because he didn't want to tell me anything else, and I wasn't going to push him.
Right. Don't want to push him away. Right. So you've been really successful with the podcast. And you also are a blogger, right?
Yes.
So do you do any blogging related to the Primatech Files, or is it literally just the show notes that you deal with?
Oh, no. When Heroes Reborn came out, I was doing, for TV Binges, I was doing a things, recap on the episode and stuff for you to look out for, and like kind of stuff that you could, that was being planted for like future episodes. We also were lucky enough to get, a free game. So yeah, we got that a couple of days before it got released to the general public, and it took me like 3 days to complete it on my iPad. And I had to complete it because I had to get it out before the general release. So yeah, we got very lucky in some respects. Like there was a magazine that came out. I managed to speak to one of the senior editors on it because it wasn't coming out that much over here in England, or I couldn't find it. And he ended up sending me free copies. We got very lucky with some of the stuff. But you have to take those opportunities where you can get it.
Now, this is part one of the strategy that I want to talk about. Mm-hmm. You did get a lot of attention. You guys ended up on TV, Canadian, what was it? Entertainment Tonight. Yeah. You ended up getting some great interviews. You got some, as you said, some early release stuff. How did you go about doing that? And this is, we're going to framework it in TV, but anybody listening, I mean, whatever your show is about, whatever your blog is about, whatever your YouTube channel is about, you've got a subject you're working on. So you can take these ideas and kind of go out. How did you attract that attention?
Well, it was, a lot of my stuff was done through Twitter. I know there's loads, we've got other social medias. We've got we got Facebook, Tumblr, Clamour, but most of it was from Twitter, and most of all of our content stems from Twitter, and then the rest kind of was just placed on the other social media platforms. We managed to get followed by quite a couple of, big Heroes Reborn kind of official sites. There's a Heroes Universe, which was very big, and we even got followed by the Heroes official account. One of the biggest things that kind of was the linchpin of everything was a Facebook group on Facebook called Heroes Fans Unite. And one of the admins of that, when Heroes was first about, they were doing a lot of the stuff that we were doing. They were covering everything from Heroes. And I guess they took a liking to us, and they helped us out with a lot of interviews. And we got, it was interviews from Heroes Prime, so all the original stuff, but then she managed to get us quite a lot of other Heroes Reborn people. And from that kind of, from getting the interviews with Tim Kring was a really big one, who's the creator of the show.
Yeah, that's a huge one to get.
From that's where everything kind of stems from. And we were able to get the executive producer, and the executive producer was able to put us in touch with, casting. And cause Lilith was really big on talking to one of the casting agents. And then, he was able, and then we got a couple of the writers to follow us, and they liked us a lot. And, we've interviewed a couple of them a couple of times. So yeah, it was just really a lot of being in the right places at the right time. The Facebook group also got us onto ET Canada, because I was putting the episodes on the Facebook group as well as my 5 things. And the producer from ET Canada saw it and said, "I'd love to talk to you." And that's where that stems from.
Wow. You actually there was a lot more than just being in the right place at the right time in what you just said. I have a couple of questions. This is one of those episodes I'm going to have to go back and take notes and then re-listen again and take notes again, I have a feeling. So you get in with this group, this Facebook group.
Yeah.
And they're connecting you. How does that go? And how does all of this go? Because I know personally, we interviewed Doug Jones, and that was a big interview for me. I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
And I don't do a lot of those types of interviews just because I just don't. But this was one I wanted to grab. And the way that happened was I tweeted something. I tagged him in it just because it was relevant to him. He wrote back and said, "Oh, thank you so much." And I said, "Is there any way I could possibly interview you?" He gave me his PR person, and we set it up. Is that the route you've had to go, or has it been more they've contacted you and said, "I'd love to be on," or have you seen their name pop up and you've written back and said, "Hey, can we make this happen?"
Well, it works out a lot of different ways. The Tim Kring interview was set up through the person on the Heroes Reborn Facebook group, and she got us a lot of other interviews with people from Heroes, the original series. but a lot of the Heroes Reborn interviews were done literally through tweeting. I basically would set up the notifications. So as soon as they tweeted, anyone from the show, whether it be cast, crew, writers, I wanted to speak to everyone about their opinion on the show. As soon as they tweeted, I would get a notification. I would tweet them directly straight at that time. But look, I run a Heroes Reborn podcast. Would you have time for an interview? And, some people got back to us, like Eve Harlow, pretty much as soon as she got the tweet, she said yes, and just told her to follow us. And then we arranged the time through that. The same thing happened with quite a lot of them, like Zach Crayley, one of the writers, was exactly the same. But I think Zach Crayley also had kind of heard of us through I don't know if they were blowing smoke into our, but, Zach Crayley was like, we listened to you guys in the writer's room. And I think that helped us out a little bit. But, again, I don't know if he was just, being very nice. But yeah, a lot of the writers kind of got in with talking to us about it. And we're going to kind of try and do more stuff with that because, Heroes Reborn, the DVD came out and some of the extras were not very good. So we're trying to do a commentary with the writer and us. Oh
my gosh, what a great idea.
That's the idea. We've already talked to one guy. We've already talked to two of them and they said they're up for it. It's just about trying to find time. So yeah.
Now, you said something in there again that I want to go back to. And this is something that I've gleaned. We've had, by the way, people that listen to this show, we've had Lilith on as a guest.
Yeah.
And the next person I'm going to bring up is Troy Heinrich, who was the first or second guest. I think Lilith might have been one and he was number two. Mm. Troy does a Blacklist podcast that has been nominated and has done really well. And in what you just said, it reminded me of Troy because they have had the same type of experience with the writer's room for Blacklist. And I think that might be a key if you're doing TV or if you're doing film or any type of subject, you find out what that step is and maybe retweet to that group. I'm sure Heroes probably has a Heroes Writers Room Twitter account, correct?
Oh, no, it doesn't.
Oh, really?
So basically, as soon as Heroes, they started announcing everything for Heroes Reborn, like from the cast, I pretty much was on IMDb every other day looking at it and seeing who was writing episodes. I would try and find them on Twitter. I made a comprehensive list of pretty much everyone who worked on the show, whether it be like a recurring character, a character who's only in it for 1 or 2 episodes who I really liked, the main cast, the writers, some of the makeup artists, the musicians, everyone. I made a comprehensive list on on the Primatech Files Twitter, and every day I would search through that to see what they were talking about, and I would have them notify, like it would notify as soon as they tweeted. So I would straight away just be able to say, would you have time for an interview to talk about your time on Heroes? And, a lot of the we got quite a few of the secondary characters, and I appreciate that so much because some of them were some of my favorite characters. And the writers really helped us out as well, I think. So, yeah.
So, yeah, I think that there's a lot there to unpack in that don't just go for the prime people. You want to try to build those relationships and they open the doors to other things.
Yeah.
Now, we keep talking about Twitter and we keep talking about that. At one point, I had asked you what your strategy was because you were getting a lot of attention. And your response back to me was, I don't have any. You said, I have OCD. I just do this a lot. And then, and it's funny because you don't know this, but on my end, I was trying to figure out why it was blowing up so much. So I started trying to analyze all the little pieces. And one thing I did was I took 4 days of tweets and I wrote down when you tweeted and what you tweeted. And that was when I asked you about your strategy. And when you said you didn't have one, I found it really interesting because you naturally did a couple of things. One was you were almost right on for the 80-20 rule. 20% original tweets, 80% retweets. I mean, you were almost spot on with that in that 4-day mark. You also didn't have, I tweet at 3 and then I tweet at 5. It was just kind of throughout the day. There wasn't a rhyme or reason to it, but I did see a consistency, and it seemed like it could be unobtrusive. Now, if you're working from lists, I'm sure that makes it really easy to do the retweeting thing because you're getting those notifications, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was just, to me, it was really telling that it wasn't so much about the strategy as much as it was about the consistency of just doing it and being cognizant of who is involved with the show.
Well, it all kind of started with the kind of pre-Heroes Reborn, because as soon as we found out that the show was coming on, me and Lilith started thinking about how we can incorporate people into it, because you need an audience, and we didn't know, this show had been off the air for like 5 years. So we had to try and bring them back into it. So the first thing we did was we're going to do a weekly live tweet, and we're going to rewatch the episodes. And then directly afterwards, me and Lilith were going to do all those episodes as a podcast, separately. And that's how we started. We started off with really small numbers because we only had a few people who were joining in, but we kept those loyal fans and they came with us the whole way through. And that's kind of where it started. So what would happen was, it was basically, I would have a routine on what I would do. I would wake up first thing in the morning, maybe about an hour and a half before I actually had to leave the house. And I would go through Twitter and I would go through the Heroes hashtag, and I would respond to everyone and I would retweet anything that was good. I did the same with the Heroes Reborn, and that would be like a good 45 minutes of my first thing in the morning. And then maybe about lunchtime, I do exactly the same thing. But because obviously, of the time difference, it would show up at a different time in America. Like it would be like the middle of the night, but it was something that people who would follow us would be able to look through when they got up. And I would always make sure it was the last thing at night I did. So I was doing like that 3 times a day. I was going to the hashtags of anything that was relevant for Heroes, or anything that I could try and make relevant to Heroes. So like if there was National Sibling Day, I would put as many siblings in Heroes as I could in a tweet, and I would tweet that out. We got really lucky that an eclipse happened in the
right. Good timing.
So we just that was all day of me trying to find time of checking Heroes and tweeting everyone, retweeting. And as soon as someone responded, I would follow them, hoping for them to follow me back. And then, we kind of built up an audience that way. And then you tell them we do a weekly rewatch if you want to join us for a live tweet. And anytime someone would join us for the live tweet, we would shout them out on the episode. And as soon as the episode went out, we would tweet them saying, you got a shout out on the episode. Make sure you listen and all that kind of stuff. And everything from Heroes Reborn kind of followed that same pattern. We would ask people for feedback, and no matter what feedback they gave, we would read it out and then we would tweet them when the episode came out. We also tweeted to a couple of because anytime someone from the Heroes Reborn cast tweeted at us, or we tweeted at them and they tweeted back, then I was like, okay, they're on the list. And I would have a list on my notes on my iPhone of people we would tweet every time a new episode came out. So we'd always tweet out the same bunch of people. And if after a while, I figured out that they were getting annoyed with it, I'd take them off, and I'd only do it if it was relevant to them. Obviously, if we were bad-mouthing people, we would take them off.
Right.
But yeah, it just kind of became a routine of stuff that I was doing, and that was it. Yeah.
Interesting. Now, you mentioned other social media. You mentioned, you've got Clamor, you've got Tumblr, Facebook. Now, you said that you basically create the content that you're going to use to push out from Twitter, and then you just push it to those things. Do you do any type of strategy for those other formats, or is it really just you push it from here and it goes where it goes?
Yeah, it's literally if a new trailer came out, I would watch the trailer and I would screenshot any new scenes and I would make an analysis of it for Twitter. Something for 100, the characters that were needed. And then I would do exactly the same thing with that on the Facebook and on the Tumblr, but I would elongate it because you've got more words to play with and more characters to play with.
Important. That's important. So you're not taking your tweet and just pushing it to Facebook and Tumblr.
No,
you're taking the same content, putting it there, but adding a little bit, changing it slightly.
Yeah. Yes.
That is important, Ricky. So an idea I'm really high on right now that I'm trying to develop for us And when I say us, I mean, we have 88 shows in this network. It's going to be 100 by Christmas. And I can't obviously handle all of those. You see how hard it is to handle one.
Yeah.
So I'm actually writing like a playbook for everybody, and we talk about it on here. I'm kind of sharing it as we explore this. But a big thing that I'm high on right now is this idea of you create something. So you take an episode of Primatech Files, and we pretty much do what you do. You find different ways of sending it out there. But my big thought right now is, how do you create multiple pieces of content off of that one piece of content that you can use for social media? So what I mean is, you mentioned your top 5 list. You mentioned clamors. So you make 5 clamors off of the episode. You make sure you send those out. You make sure that you have screen caps and you tweet some of that stuff out. You make sure that you have a blog post if you can, or whatever. So it's not just the one piece of content getting pushed out there. Doing that, it sounds like you're naturally kind of doing that. I'm trying to develop a strategy a little bit more so it's a little easier for people to grip onto. My question is, how much do you push that one piece? So let's say you make your blog post your top 5. Okay? You tweet it out when you're done.
Yeah.
You put it on Facebook. You obviously stagger that, correct?
Yeah.
How often?
Actually, no, I don't stagger it. I pretty much, if I create like something for Twitter, I would, once I finish with it, I pretty much put it onto Facebook and Tumblr
just
straight
at the
away.
same time. It just goes.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, the only reason I do that is because I've got everything in my hand there and I can do it straight away. It's not because I could push it out at a later time, but I feel like if I'm going to be doing something on Twitter, I might as well do it on the other two, because people might not be looking at the Twitter at that time. They might be looking at the Facebook, or they might be looking at Tumblr. So for me, that's how I do it. And most of my stuff is is done on Twitter, not pushed out. And it's repeated on that.
Sure.
And the rest, I kind of one and done it.
Okay. That makes sense. And when you do this on Twitter, so let's say you take your top 5 list, how often are you tweeting out that tweet about the top 5 list? Not the other content we're talking about. Or let's say a clamor. Let's say you make a clamor. Do you send it out once and it's out in the ether? Or do you say, you know what, I'm going to send out a clamor on Monday, and then I'm going to wait 24 hours and send it again, and then I'll wait 4 days and send it again? Do you have any type of strategy like that?
No, I pretty much just push it out. The only thing that I always push out every day is my episodes, because that's all. Like, it sounds really bad, but I'm just all about the download numbers.
Sure.
So that
doesn't sound bad.
That's what I do.
That's what we're all driven by. So, do you send out? So let's say it's episode 164.
Yeah.
Will that go out every day, one time? Will it go out multiple times? And then another question is, will it go out with the same link? Meaning, do you send the iTunes link? Do you send the Google Play link? Do you send the Libsyn link? How do you manage that?
I only ever do the iTunes link. But that's just because that's how I've been doing it. I haven't even thought about putting out different links for it. But basically so today is my Primatech Files day. That's when a new episode gets released. So I will do a tweet for each individual, podcatcher service. And then I will finish it with the iTunes. And then tomorrow, around about the same time, which is about 8 o'clock my time, maybe 10, just depending on when I'm tired, basically, I will just do it in case you missed it tweet with generally I will put the newest episode, and then at the moment I'm doing old episodes underneath. Yeah. So I'm just doing one extra, like moving up one a day. So I will do that all throughout the week until the next week. And then next Wednesday, I will put the new episode, and then so on and so forth. And
then in case you missed it.
Yeah. Yeah. And if, like, say, we're doing the comics, once I finish once we get to the 5th issue, which is the last one, what I will probably do is I will put two in case you missed it tweets out a day with all 5 episodes, so that you can listen to them continuously.
Interesting. Now, fan interaction.
Yeah.
You're obviously dealing with them on Twitter. You're talking to people. Are you finding that fan interaction is a key to this also?
Yeah. Well, when we first started it, there was only a couple of people who were following us and a couple of people who would tweet out to us all the time. And it was really good because because we were doing this rewatch at the end of like the first season, we were able to do a Google Play. We were able to do a Google Hangout, and we had about 8 to 9 people on that, which, for a little show which had been off the air for like 5 years, I was quite proud of it. And then we put that out as a podcast as well. So we were able to let them know that, you were involving them in everything. So it's the same with the feedback. As soon as we finished one of the rewatches, we would say, okay, so what did you think of that episode? You can tweet us. You can let us know on our Facebook. You can let us know via email. We will read out anything. And we did that. And then, like I said, we would tweet them as soon as that episode became available to air. And then the same thing happened with the Facebook group. So I would put like every time a new episode come up, I would put a post in. The admins on there were really great about us, just like pimping out our episodes essentially. And at the bottom of that, in a comment, I would write everyone who we had talked to or who had sent in feedback. I would say, you got a shout out in this episode. Make sure you listen. And then the same thing happened on the Facebook group where I would ask a question and then they would answer and then I'd talk to them. And, it's always good to have that kind of fan interaction because it makes them feel part of the crew, or as we call them, Primatech peeps. So yeah.
Interesting. Well, what points haven't we talked about here? I'm sure that we're going to finish and I'm going to have 800 ideas, but what haven't we talked about here? What points did you want to make?
Branding. We got lucky in the fact that Primatech Files was available on pretty much everywhere that we went. It's not, the thing about the name Primatech Files is you don't instantly think of Heroes unless you're a really big Heroes fan, but I think it's a brand that we've been able to develop, and we're starting to move off into other things now. And, I'm as much, we'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
What else?
But branding is important, and take your brand and work it.
Yeah, definitely. What else?
You actually said something important there too. This is an ongoing conversation I've had with people because we have shows with, some of them have very unique names. Some of them are spot on. 12 Monkeys podcast is about the 12 Monkeys TV show. Okay. Primatech Files is about heroes. That may not ring. Nuff Said podcast is about Marvel. It's about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is what it was originally about. Now it's all about Marvel. I think that in your branding, I think it's important to either be spot on, like 12 Monkeys, or to do, if you're going to do it, find something that speaks to the fan. Primatech Files, because I was a Heroes fan, I knew what that was.
Yeah.
Nuff Said, everybody that's a Marvel fan knows Stan Lee ends everything with Nuff Said. They immediately know that's a Marvel show.
Yeah.
And then you make sure you have your tag, a Heroes podcast, a Marvel podcast. That's how you build that brand, but work that brand. Don't keep shifting it underneath you.
But also we start every episode, we start off with the same blurb, which is, we're part of the Southgate Media Group. This is Primatech Files, part of the Southgate Media Group, a Heroes and Heroes Reborn podcast, dedicated to all things in the Heroes universe. That's how we start off every episode. And then we always end on the same end tag, or like we have one of 2 end tags, and we always end off with something Heroes related. And whenever we did interviews with people, we were able to get them to say our end tag. And that's a nice little note that you can have. That's a nice little note you could have in a clamor to say. You could say, you could have that, and that's all you need. And then you could say, this is an interview with Eve Harlow. They know it's an interview with Eve Harlow because she says her name, she says our tag at the end, and then a link to that interview. So yeah.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny because when you talk about that beginning and ending as a producer, and this may seem rote to some people listening, but to a lot of podcasters, especially new people, they don't understand that importance of having that beginning and the end.
Yeah.
And have something that builds the brand at the beginning and the end, and don't stumble on them.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than stumbling through the beginning and the end of your show and you feeling like, what did I just listen to?
Yeah.
And the other one, you mentioned them getting people to say it. I can't tell you how many people in the beginning when we interviewed people for Nuff Said, or when we would even interview other podcasters, talk to other podcasters, they all wanted to say our tagline, which is at the very end. We say, that's it, everybody, Nuff Said. And they would all say, do I get to say Nuff Said? Having that type of brand building is so important.
Yeah.
Because the fan grips it.
And also we're going to start moving, obviously, because Heroes is on, I'm going to say hiatus at the moment.
Yeah, we're going to call it hiatus.
We're going to start branching out into other kind of superhero shows, but that aren't kind of Marvel DC related, because I think that's kind of another niche little market that's not kind of being looked into. So we're moving on to Alphas next, and Alphas was very Heroes. It was kind of like Heroes, but on the Sci-Fi Channel, a bit more grounded in reality. And we've got about 4 or 5 episodes in the can, but it took us about 3 or 4 episodes to think of an end tag. And that was something I was really pushing to. We needed a decent end tag, and we finally got one. And I'm really looking forward to like moving on to these other shows.
Now, is Alpha staying on Primatech Files, or is it going to be its own? Okay.
Yes. So we're going to branch everything out, and it's just going to be Alpha Files. Cause on Primatech Files, we've got about 3 or 4 different segments. We've got Primatech Files, which is looking at the old episodes. We've got Rebellion Reborn, which was looking at Heroes Reborn. We've got, Molly Walker, which was thinking about like the kind of hiatus-y kind of things. We've got the interviews. We've got Rebellion Reborn Roundtable, Rebellion Reborn Review. We've got lots of different segments on the Primatech Files. So the way I'm seeing it is we want to keep that branding, and we want to keep that kind of, that list of, put that body of work behind us. And, you know, anyone who's an Alphas fan is probably going to be a Heroes fan as well. So if we only pick up people now from Alphas, they know that when they go to our feeds, that they've got all this Heroes Reborn and Heroes stuff that they can listen to as well.
That's fantastic. And I have one more request then for you.
Yes.
Look at the show Powers.
Yeah. It's a Marvel show, isn't it, though? So
is it? Is Powers a Marvel show?
I think it's either Marvel or DC, but it's one of like the offshoots. But I was thinking about it.
It's completely an offshoot. I didn't even realize it was. So I think that it kind of stands on its own, and I think that it fits really well. Don't do the Cape. The Cape was terrible.
Oh, I might have to do the Cape. I completely forgot about that one.
I knew if I said it would bait you.
The one that we're kind of pushing towards, which I think is it's gonna be very much like Heroes and Heroes Reborn, and we're gonna pretty much do the same kind of strategy, or I will kind of do the same strategy for it, which is Sense8, because that's coming out roughly around about the end of the year. Once we finish Alphas, we'll go straight into Sense8, and it will basically be exactly the same as what happened with Heroes. We will do the rewatch and live tweet and get people to get fans from that, and then we'll do Sense8, the new season 2, weekly after it's come out. Just hope that we can get everything out before the new season, unlike Heroes and Heroes Reborn, where we were like mixing and matching them.
Well, I'm going to request that you let us know when you're doing a Sense8 roundtable, because we did it for Bingeworthy, and we love it. We can't wait for season 2 to come. So, and I think that's a perfect fit too. I think that makes a lot of sense with Heroes and Alphas.
I think I'll also let you know when we do the Cape as well. The Cape Files.
You please do. Please do. All right. Well, Ricky, thank you so much. This was so much information. I'm definitely going to have you back on this show. I can't wait. I've got a process. This is a lot to take in and a lot of things to take notes on. I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I did. Ricky, thank you again. Why don't you give your social media and let people know how they can get in touch with you? And if anyone has questions or comments, write to him. So go ahead, Ricky.
So you can find my podcast, Primatech Files, on any social media. Just search the word Primatech Files. Same thing with the podcatcher service. Just search Primatech Files on any podcatcher service. You will find us. And if you want to contact me, you can just find me on Twitter. That's Ricky J Diaz. That's RICKY JDIAZ, or Z if you're American.
All right, man. Thank you again, Ricky.
No problem.
New Media Lab is a Southgate Media Group production. Produced, mixed, edited, and hosted by Robert Southgate. If you enjoy New Media Lab, you'll love New Media Lab's Social Media Monday on the same feed. You can listen and subscribe to New Media Lab on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or on your favorite podcast directory. Please rate and especially review on iTunes or wherever you found our show. Reviews keep the New Media Lab on the charts, which helps other people find us. Additionally, please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/Southgate Media Group. Oh, and don't forget to visit our website at www.southgatemediagroup.com/New Media Lab. where you can also find past episodes and all our other content. Thank you so much for listening to New Media Lab, and keep creating.